On a dark and stormy night, one high school student sat in their room typing away. They listened to the rhythmic tap of the rain against the pavement through their open window, hearing the thunder boom in the distance. On this night, the student was working on an essay due at midnight. However, little did that student know, they were actually going to do just fine and get all their work done before tomorrow. Weather is weird. Not weird in the literal sense. Weather is actually very straightforward and easy to understand from a scientific point of view. But it's just weird in the ways we perceive it. Many people associate sunny days and warmer temperatures with their better days. Take the phrase, "I'm walking on sunshine," for example. The metaphor means the person is happy and has no worries while using sunshine as the medium in which this feeling derives from. Whereas in most imaging, referring to depression, they will often feature cloudy skies and pouring rain while the subject looks through a window. But that's what I don't get. See, I've always had an infatuation with rain. When I look through my window at the rain, it always brings a comforting feeling. It makes me want to cozy up with a book and a blanket, and let me tell you, it's even better if there's thunder. The boomier the better. At the same time, on warm sunny days, the weather just makes me want to cozy up by an air conditioner because of how uncomfortable the heat makes me. Well, if the rain is so sad and the sun is so happy, why do my views differ so much from the norm? Well, maybe there are other factors, these moving parts that make some dark and stormy nights and other cozy rainy evenings. But how do these weather variables influence our day-to-day moods? Well, it turns out, I'm not the only one who likes the rain. Sam Baldwin is someone very similar to me. He too loves precipitation. In his piece from 2007 in Weatherwise magazine, he explains how growing up in England gave him an appreciation for snowy weather, and it was often a special occasion because of its rarity. But he also mentions rain and its significance to him. He says, "Who can deny the delightfully cozy feeling of being snug, warm, and dry indoors while the rain lashes against the windows and big drops beat down on the rooftop?" And I have to agree with him. There is nothing that gives me more motivation and a happier feeling than doing my work next to an open window as it's raining. But why doesn't the rain elicit a depressive response in us? After all, a study led by researcher Seth Gillihan in 2011 showed that better moods were associated with less precipitation. However, Gillihan also found that, quote, "The control analyses with a single weather variable or random variable did not find any brain regions showing significant correlations with these variables," end quote. Suggesting that it is the culmination of multiple variables that affect our views on certain weather patterns, not individual variables alone. The interesting thing is that between Baldwin and my descriptions of the rain that we love, it is consistent in the fact that we both find ourselves indoors when describing this perfect weather. Perhaps your location at the time of experiencing a weather event is one of the variables that can change the weather's perceived mood. Well, another study conducted in 2005, led by researcher Matthew Keller, indicates that time spent outside does in fact have an influence on how the weather affects our mood. Barometric pressure is a way of measuring sunlight without actually measuring sunlight, because higher barometric pressure is associated with hotter, sunnier days, while lower barometric pressure is associated with rainier, cloudier, colder days. They studied the moods of individuals, their time spent outside, and the barometric pressure reported on that day. They found that people who spent more time outside on days with a higher barometric pressure and temperature reported better moods, and those who stayed inside had comparatively worse moods overall. But what was interesting about this is that the reverse of this was true as well. See, when this is reversed, it means that people who stayed indoors on days when it was rainy, cold, or cloudy had better moods than those who had gone outside. And honestly, this kind of makes sense. In my case, I don't spend as much time outside as I probably should. Being inside all the time, I can see how I may grow less fond of hotter, sunnier weather and more fond of precipitation. In Baldwin's case, he is a school teacher, so most of his time is spent indoors, and being a writer and teacher makes it easy to believe that he may not choose to spend as much of his free time outside in comparison to others. On the contrary, someone who spends a lot of time outdoors would most likely prefer sunnier weather. People like athletes, for example. I could be cozied up inside during the rain, while a long-distance runner may be disappointed that they can no longer participate in their afternoon run without getting a free shower. In fact, those who spend their time outside exercising may feel the effects of the weather even more than those who would normally just go out and spend a sunny day laying in the grass. An article by Gettick, published in 2021, talks about how a change in weather patterns can influence the amount of exercise people get. This can in turn affect their mental health because exercise can decrease stress, anxiety, and depression. So we have sunlight, precipitation, time spent outside, and potential to exercise, but what other variables can the weather have that affect the changes in our mood? Well, Baldwin later in his piece describes his 2 years he spent in Japan as an English teacher. He describes how students would become drowsy and, quote, fall into a docile stupor at their desks, end quote, during a 6-week rainy period in Japan. He describes how this period was intensely hot and humid. Humidity seems to be another very important variable that can have a drastic effect on people's moods. Katie McCallum said it best when she wrote, a 1984 study looking at a variety of mood variables. It showed that high humidity lowered concentration and increased sleepiness. This can directly explain the behavior of Baldwin's students. I can only imagine how exhausting it would be to be cooped up in a classroom all day with the intense humidity and heat. I'm sure it would feel like you were in a sauna with all that water in the air. While I'm sure normally a sunny day would bring happy feelings to these students, the high humidity, indoor environment, and excessive heat turned the weather miserable. So rainy days aren't always sad. Sunny days aren't always happy. Then what's the point? The point is that these variables can be used in our favor. If we learn the effect that these variables can have on our psyche, then we can learn how to better take advantage of the weather. We can learn to be flexible. We could be spending our rainy days cozied up inside and our sunny days outside playing in the sun. But the struggle here is not to be disappointed by the weather. It seems that our own preconceived notions about the weather can also be a variable in how it affects our mood. If we want to go outside and all of a sudden it rains, this will just contribute to a worse mood overall than if it was just the rain alone. Perhaps future research could look into how weather could affect our already existing emotions. There is a possible line of thinking that weather could serve as an emotional amplifier. We see it often in media. A character will feel a certain emotion, an emotion like sadness, then it starts to rain. Then they show the character get sadder. I know that I've had my days where I've woken up feeling great, just to see the sun peek out from behind the trees and feel even better. The connection that weather has on our already existing emotions could be an interesting development in how we are affected mentally by these weather patterns. But for now, let's all just try to bask in the sun and sing in the rain. Maybe then we could lead happier, healthier lives.